The BBC has held an Avoiding Racial Bias training session with their sports commentators on Tuesday, listing words and phrases which they must avoid during the new season. Cakewalk, nitty-gritty, sold down the river and uppity were among those on the banned list, along with blackballed, blacklisted, black mark and whiter than white. Those tuning into the webinar were also warned about how describing black players having pace or power could see them fall into the trap of racial stereotyping. Where do you go with this? Let's speak with Liam Deacon, head of press at Defund the BBC, a growing organisation, it seems, Liam. And I suppose if people want a little window into where their licence fee goes, here's one example.
Hi there. Yeah, isn't it fascinating to see the BBC taking a claim about bias so seriously, so quickly? As we all know, and as a lot of talk radio viewers will probably be aware, the BBC is quite often very, very biased against lots of different points of view. But whether or not the words nitty gritty, cakewalk, and sold down the river are culpable, I'm not sure. But it does seem to be a very bizarre thing, this, and you do have to question whether the people instituting a policy like this are solving a problem or creating one. You know, will banning words such as nitty gritty really help people of ethnic minority groups who might be having problems in their life? Is this really the solution to their problems? You know, is someone that uses the word nitty gritty motivated by hate, or is it just a common word that people use and that they don't know the sort of 15th century origins of this word? It's very, very odd, and it's very, very typical of the BBC to pounce on what was a small niche issue, sort of circling in left-wing Twitter, blow it up, use our money and our taxes to push an agenda with sort of, in our faces that really actually it is causing more problems than it's solving. I mean, this issue came from a report by an organization called Run Repeat, who did do a study into bias and perceived bias in football commentary, and they did find some discrepancies that are worth looking into. And I think that you'd be sort of mad to dismiss that outright. This was a study, and there was evidence. But the BBC, to literally a couple of weeks later do a sort of sledgehammer response to something that hasn't even been considered and balanced, is just classic BBC. And it's not this is not to run down the lived experiences of ethnic minorities who might feel there is bias in this football commentary. It is to say merely that I don't think we're being proportionate and we're really solving the problem here. And
the other problem, Liam, is that you can, other than somebody reporting or compiling some research, one small organisation saying that, you know, these words might be tricky. But what always surprises me about these kind of stories is you never meet anyone who's actually asked for this to happen. And somebody brings it upon themselves to self-flagellate and decide that some terrible things are taking place, and we are guilty of throwing out racist words like nitty-gritty and sold down the river and uppity. And somehow these need to be eradicated. Now, I just did a cursory look because I like to do a bit of research when we discuss these things, Liam, and it's very hard. I mean, there's all manner of words in our language that have a nefarious history. If we really want to go there, we'd probably be losing half the OED.
Exactly. It's just crazy. And the sort of alternatives that they've suggested to some of these words are quite amusing. The alternative to nitty gritty suggested is the most relevant fact of practical relevance. Imagine saying, I got in a muddle there anyway. Imagine saying that halfway through a football game. Like, these people are so far removed from reality, and that it's just astonishing. I would like to pick up on one thing as well. Like, it does strike me, and I think you're totally right about no one being offended by this before. It's like what I said, they're creating problems. But, you know, it's very striking that they want to ban a word like uppity, used in reference to minority groups. But the BBC will proudly run programs and promote them across social media, calling sort of white working class groups Karens. And they'll run segments telling Karens, so-called Karens, to shut up and get out of the way.
Well, didn't just run them, but heavily promoted them as well.
Exactly. And they'll pick up on perceived offence against uppity, but not Karens. And then, it just really does strike me. I mean, I'm not for banning words like Karens. I do think it's a nasty thing to say about an entire group of people, a group of people that, I might identify with. But it's still like shouldn't be banned. It's something that certain middle class people like to laugh at working class people and call them Karens. And that's fine. They can do. They can expose themselves for being who they are. So that's fine. But it's just extraordinary that the BBC does seem to have consistently a one-sided approach to these things. They consistently look at it from a one-sided point of view. And the other thing I would like to pick up on quite quickly is all of this is happening just days after the incoming new Director General of the BBC promised that he would have a comprehensive and immediate crackdown on bias at the BBC. He rather notably has rewound the decision to ban the words to patriotic songs at the proms, but he said that he will be coming down immediately on this, And I just think this just shows immediately that we can't trust a word that he says. Okay, there is no way that one man coming in after decades and decades of bias is going to solve this problem overnight. Okay, he might have said some slightly encouraging things. Well, actually, I've read his speech in full. Okay, and he uses the word impartiality 11 times in this speech, more than any other long word of its type in this speech. But he doesn't lay out any solutions. His only solution to this, really, he mentions bringing in alternative voices. These are all things past director generals have said. He mentions a few other things, but the one thing he really focusing on is banning staff from giving their opinions on social media. Yeah. And I actually think like that the BBC staff giving their
it's almost the least of his problems, really, isn't it, Liam?
It is, and ironically, the staff giving their opinions on social media has actually exposed to a lot of people what a lot of this bubble believes, the BBC bubble believes, and as soon as we stop them doing that, they won't be able to do that. It was very interesting in the proms debate. They sort of tried to blame it on coronavirus later, didn't they? They were like, oh no, the only reason we banned these lyrics was because of coronavirus. And we were sort of like, oh no, you didn't.
That's right. And
then it all came exposed because a high-ranking BBC executive had compared these songs to Nazi propaganda. And it's the use of social media actually is quite helpful, I think, in exposing what these people, the ludicrous things these people really believe. And so all this new Director General is doing is he's seeking to hide, he's seeking to mask the problem, he's seeking to paper over the cracks. I don't know if he's actually interested in tackling the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is things like this. They go head over their heels to sort of tackle a perceived offence on one side of the fence, but not another. Yeah. And this is happening right when he said he'd be solving the problem. And we're seeing just classic BBC. More of the same.
Indeed. Liam, great to have you on, sir. Passionate stuff. Liam Deacon, thank you. Head of Press at Defund the BBC, an organisation that seems to be gathering quite a bit of momentum. And you can understand why when you read stories like this. Let's just call it what it is. This is absolute grade A garbage. High octane nonsense. It should be ignored by every person that works at the BBC and elsewhere. The idea that somebody dreams up a group of words that once upon a time may well have had offence in their origins, but 500, 1,000 years later stand and mean something completely different. That is called the evolution of language, by the way. And if you want to go down the etymological route of all manner of areas, I promise you, I'll give you a big old list right now, if you fancy it, of words which, frankly, have horrendous history, but we use as absolute commonplace. I mean, the obvious one I stumbled across was the word hysterical, which, of course, we have as a, often as a positive word. It was hysterical. It was incredibly funny. In fact, it's a Greek word. It comes from the Greek word hysterica. You know what that means, hysterica? It means uterus. Yes, uterus. It was believed that women in particular suffered hysteria disorder caused by disturbances of their uterus. So essentially women were mad because they had a womb. That's the derivative of that. Ghetto is an obvious example as well. I mean, look at the anti-Semitic nature of the word ghetto and where that's been used. It derives from the Italian ghetto, used in the 1500s to refer to part of Venice where Jews were forced to live. Mumbo jumbo is another one. It's a West African phrase. The word, a masked male dancer who was involved in some suspicious arcane rituals. Shouldn't be using that. Here's a classic one. And when you think about this, it's really obvious. No can do. Where do you think that comes from? Con, you're a relatively bright man. I'm over-egging it slightly there. No can do. You think, everyone, no can do. You know what that's about? That's about pidgin English. It's about taking the mick out of the Chinese way. A Chinese person would say, I can't do it. No can do. You can imagine it now. Wow. We use that as a term all the time. Moron is another classic. All fun and games, a bit of a moron. It's used as a kind of a throwaway. Given the history, it's very offensive to compare someone you think acting foolish to a person with a disability, a genuine term used to classify someone with mild intellectual disabilities. The list goes on. Bigot, for example, was used originally only to take the mickey out of the Swiss and their moustaches. Addict, there's another word. The word addict comes from the Roman creditors enslaving debtors. Villain was a derisive term for the poor. You could go on and on and on forever on this and look at roots. Well, that's offensive to that group, that's offensive to that group, and that's offensive to another group. And what's most frustrating about this, in fact, no, what's criminal about this, is that nobody has asked for this. You will not find the individual that said, yeah, I heard somebody say nitty-gritty or sold down the river or blackballed. I heard that the other day. Blackballed? I don't know what the root of that is. I mean, it's been used forever. It's without doubt would have been used more in its current usage than it would have been in its original, if there is an original. Whiter than white. That's apparently offensive. Saying a footballer has pace could be seen as a racial stereotype. Whoever it was at the BBC that said we need to organise a webinar, and this would have been a cost associated to this as well. No doubt some sort of legal expert in common and historic parlance would have been there to brutalise and police the lexicon of football commentators all over the place. You imagine if Jimmy Hill had been in the room back in the day. Wow, that'd have been fun and games. Whoever came up with that at the BBC shouldn't just be kicked out of the BBC. They should be in jail, frankly. This is a crime against not just common sense, it's a crime against decency. It is race baiting. You are creating a problem that doesn't exist. You are one of the bad guys. You're not one of the good people. It is racist in order to try and invoke and create arguments about race that were never there before. Shame on whoever it is over there at BBC HQ that thought it was a darn good idea because of the self-flagellating... Oh my goodness, look, we've got terrible things going on. There's bras being sold in M&S that are racist. There's peanuts being sold that are racist. Everything around us is racist. What are we going to do about it? We must be a bit racist too. Where are we? Can we put a call out to find out where we're racist? I mean, we already think we're terribly racist, but we want to find out that we're actually catastrophically racist. So off they go, find the survey. Oh, there it is. Let's just pull that one out the air. Yeah, there it is. We've got it. We've got a list of words here that make us really bad people if we ever use them, even though no one ever used them in the current context, knowing anything about the historic context. And even though we've got another list of words, if we want to go on forever, that we could wheel out as often as we like, that could also be deemed as offensive. We're not going to include those because they don't sit in the current narrative. This is bonkers. This is absolute cast iron bonkers. High octane nonsense. Grade A filth from the BBC. There's no way anybody should be allowed to get away with this kind of nonsense. And then Tim Davie pitches up as the new Director General, as our last guest just said, and says, I'm going to sort this out. Sorry, Tim, you started out promising for 3 days. You better get onto this one, mate, and say sorry. All of these phrases are absolutely fine. Nothing to see here. We'll take your calls and comments on that. The language police are back. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio.